Right, we're live here at IMI Studios in New York City. I am excited to be here with my friend and colleague Bruce Bryan. Bruce, tell us more about yourself.
Thank you for having me. My name is Bruce Bryan. I'm a criminal legal reform advocate, public speaker, and I like to focus on mindset shifting.
Great to be with you, Matteo. Bruce, I'm a prisoner by choice and defender of justice defenders, a community of people that's working to equip the defenseless to become defenders of the defenseless.
Beautiful. I look forward to talking more about Justice Defender, an organization that I'm also part of. I've been with it for now 10 years, and it's exciting to be here in New York City to bring the story of justice defenders to the world. Alexander, how did this work start?
The work started by chance. I was 18. I went to volunteer at a hospice in Uganda. I realized that I could learn loads from people who were dying, having been involved in caring for dying people in London. I ended up meeting young prisoners dying in Malago Hospital. I spent time washing them and feeding them and advocating for them before they died. I thought they were just like me. They wanted to feel seen, to feel known, to feel loved. I realized that proximity changes us, and getting to know these guys, people like Charles, who was accused of theft and beaten by the police until he was bleeding all over his body, or Peter, was 21 and had AIDS and cancer and Norwegian scabies. All his skin was peeling off. I got scabies from him. It formed my heart and intrigued me to see where they came from. So I bulldozed my way into Uganda's maximum security prison, and it changed my life.
Bruce, how did you get involved in this work?
I was arrested at 23 and wrongfully convicted for a murder I did not commit, and I spent the last 29 years incarcerated in maximum security prisons across New York State. And the conditions that I witnessed, so many young African Americans languishing behind bars with so much potential, I decided that I didn't want to serve time, but I wanted to have time serve me. And that's when I went on a mission, and I realized that if I changed the way I look at things, things would change the way that they look. And so I took on this journey. It was really an internal journey of self-reflection and introspection, which led me to realize that I was so much more than where I was, and I wasn't defined by my conditions, that I could transcend, any space that I was in if I just changed my mind. So I didn't want to be defined by prison. Didn't want to be defined by my circumstances. And so I felt compelled to do something about it, and I realized that the only person that can change was me. Right, and so this journey of this internal journey was one that was very hard, very scary, because it causes you to pause and look at yourself and ask the questions of who am I, why am I here, why was I created, how can I contribute to humanity, and that meant being in touch with my best self. That means being in touch with who I am and finding out more about me, so that I can in turn be able to pour into someone else. And so thus began my journey of advocacy while I was inside. Thus became my journey of not just being a spokesperson for myself, but for others, and for causes and conditions that I felt were oppressive and dehumanizing. And I began to speak out. And at one point I took for granted that what became natural for me, almost, becoming my own advocate, is very difficult for others. Being your own advocate it's a work, it's a job, and so I'm grateful that God chose me and opened up my eyes and allowed me to be able to be my own advocate and fight for myself as well as fight for others. And I take pride in that, and I take this work personal because I spent more than half my life wrongfully incarcerated. So this is meaningful work to me. The things that drove me at 23, 21, 22 are not the things that drive me at 55, right? The things that bring me joy are a lot different than the things that brought me joy as a young person,
Yes.
right? And so I just want to have a meaningful existence and try to impact the lives of as many people as I can in a very, decent and respectful way, and help them rise to the occasion and let them know that they're more than the worst thing they've ever done.
That's incredibly powerful.
Thank
There's
you.
so much to unpack there. And it sounds like you've been a victim of injustice, of oppression. You've seen the system from the inside out. What does a just justice system look like to you?
A justice system looks like one that is that is not punitive, one that actually takes into consideration the social conditions that produce crime. Because we often talk about the person who created a bad act, but no one is born a criminal. All right? Poverty is violence. Poverty is criminality. And poverty is a crime. In fact, poverty is the number one crime generative factor that exists. So I think that if we want to change the conditions of mass incarceration, of systemic oppression, we have to first deal with the social conditions in which we live in, and we have to address poverty.
Alexander, what do you think? What does a just justice system look like, and how does justice defenders tackle that problem?
My dream, our dream, is a justice system, not just in Uganda and Kenya where we work or in the US, but globally. It's a dream of a world where every person accused of a crime has a chance to tell their side of the story before being convicted or punished for it. There are millions of people around the world who are accused of crimes, and they have no idea how to speak on their own behalf, and they have no one to speak for them. So if they even get a chance to go to court, they've got no idea what to do there. Sometimes they're kneeling on the floor, thinking they can't even stand in the judge's presence. So we know how powerful it is to have that chance to tell your side of the story, and that can bring peace, even if one ends up being convicted, having been heard, having been able to put forward the facts that you understand them is different from having been kept silent.
Mm-hmm. How does that vision manifest in the work of justice defenders?
As we think of this dream of telling thousands of stories each year, tens of thousands, that otherwise wouldn't be heard, we do it through training prisoners and prison officers as paralegals. St. Oscar Romero said certain things can only be seen through eyes that have cried. And I sense that, Bruce, as I spend time with you, as I've been into prisons in Uganda and Kenya with you, as we sit together here, and as I see tears come to your eyes when you recall your experiences with us and during your 29 years in prison. So that understanding, that first-hand perspective that our paralegals have, that those who are studying law with the University of London with us have, the fact they're embedded deep in those communities. So at night time they can sit in the wards with maybe 50, 60, 80, 100 other men and talk about the law with them, talk about their cases, talk about their rights, talk about process from a point of proximity. We know it leads to transformation. It doesn't only transform the lives of our paralegals who gain purpose, which we all need, we all yearn for, whether a death row inmate or a Supreme Court judge. I believe every one of us needs to go to bed at the end of the day feeling that our day has counted for something, and to look back from our deathbeds at the end of our lives feeling that our lives have counted for something and helping others to get justice. That's great purpose. I don't think you can beat it. But it also means that the prisons we work in become peaceful. Because when people feel that they're getting justice, it brings peace compared to being in limbo and definitely waiting for that day in court and having no idea if it'll come, if it does, what to do with it.
Mm-hmm. And tell us just in a minute, what has Justice Defenders achieved since founding?
In terms of numbers, we've worked on more than 150,000 prisoners' cases. 50,000 of them have been released from prison by the courts. We've trained 600 prisoners and prison officers as paralegals, studying together. One of them in Uganda said, before you train me as a paralegal, this is a prison officer, I used to torture prisoners. Now I'm proud that I go to court to help them to win their freedom. We train others in law with the University of London, following in Nelson Mandela's footsteps and studying law with the University of London from prisons in Africa. Last year alone we had 47 prisoners and prison officers and ex-prisoners graduate with the University of London law degrees. We celebrated our first 2 University of London graduates who've gone on to become barristers or advocates of the High Court or attorneys here in the US. So they've gone from the bars to the bar. They've shown that the impossible is possible. We can move from the margins of society into positions where we're the ones making and shaping and implementing the law. And we've shown that we can do it as a community of unlikely allies, people who are hated many because we've stolen, we've raped, we've killed, we've tortured, we've terrorized, and we've been innocently imprisoned. We believe all of us can serve, and we serve anyone regardless of what they've done. But we come together as this community of unlikely allies, trying to serve with love and having our hearts transformed in the process. So beyond the numbers, I'm proud of that transformation that's taking place within me, that's taking place within you, that's taking place within Bruce. I know that we'll never be the same again because of the work that we've done together and the life that we share.
Thank you for that. That's incredibly powerful. Bruce, you've seen the work firsthand. You've seen the impact firsthand. What was that experience like?
Profound, to say the least. When you go into the prisons in Uganda or Kenya, you see human beings. You see human beings that look like me. You see a sea of blackness. The most difficult journey was going into the females' prison and watching the children's unit, where children who were born to incarcerated mothers, born in prison. These children were born in prison. Just think about that for a moment. Children born in prison, having never committed a crime, having never known what crime is. These children are born here. And they're raised there for 4 years of their lives. And if they don't have a safe space to go home to, the government takes them. Now, being incarcerated in New York State, I'm familiar with the puppy program, which is in several prisons, Greenhaven, Fishkill, and several other institutions, where incarcerated people are tasked with raising puppies. Normally, they're Labrador retrievers. And they raise these puppies for 2 years, and then they hand them over to someone who has been impacted by PTSD. More than likely it's someone who's coming from the military. And they train these animals for 2 years to be therapy dogs. And I've watched men cry and break down when they had to give these dogs away. Imagine what a mother goes through when she has to give her child away that she bonded with for 4 years in breastfeeding. Now a child, to me, I love the animals and I love dogs, but it's no comparison to a mother and her baby.
It's heartbreaking.
It's heartbreaking. It's heart-wrenching. And this doesn't have to be the case. You see, one of the things that I've learned through Justice Defenders is that when given the opportunity, socioeconomic background doesn't matter because talent is ubiquitous. Intelligence is ubiquitous. People from impoverished communities are brilliant. They're bright. As we see with Justice Defenders, they go on to be paralegals and have won thousands and thousands of cases, including their own in some situations, right? It's just that they were not provided with the opportunity. So we have talent in our community. We have talent in the most impoverished places of the world, but they're not given the opportunities. It's why I always say poverty is violence. Poverty is criminal, right? So a justice system that is premised on systemically oppressing the marginalized black and brown people, and they do not have the same justice as someone who is wealthy and guilty as someone who is poor and innocent. The wealthy and guilty have a much better chance of not going to prison. The poor and innocent, it's highly likely that they'll be incarcerated. I met men in Africa who were convicted for stealing a cell phone and sentenced to death. Now, I think the world needs to hear that. I think the world needs to understand. How do you give another human being a death sentence for stealing a cell phone? For stealing a cell phone. Now, I would implore everybody, just think about that for a moment. Right? And think about that young girl, 21 years old, who's been abused for the better part of her life by her significant other. And then as a result of her being tired of the abuse, she defends herself and she takes his life. Think of that young girl being sentenced to death. And then having studied in the law and becoming an advocate and becoming a paralegal, had the opportunity to have her sentence converted to life without parole, which is still death by incarceration. Justice looks like opportunity. Justice to me looks like equality. Justice to me looks like an even playing field where people can thrive, where they don't have to live in the mindset of survival mode, but that they feel entitled, that they feel empowered to thrive, just like others who don't necessarily look like them. Mm-hmm. Right? This is what justice looks like. And the work that Justice Defenders does is empowering incarcerated people. But not only them, also the guards.
Yes.
And this is transforming lives across the continent. Because you don't experience that, you don't witness that, even on the outside, and not be changed and not have a change of heart.
Yes.
You see?
Alexander, how did that intuition to train prisoners and prison officers side by side came to be?
I've been deeply moved going into prison and seeing the overcrowding, understanding about the lack of healthcare, the lack of access to education, and believing that regardless of what someone's done or hasn't done, everyone deserved to have those basic rights met. But with time, as I got to know prisoners and heard about the backgrounds they came from, usually backgrounds of poverty, as Bruce has spoken about, I sometimes heard that they sold everything they had to pay a lawyer, and the lawyer took the money and was never seen again. I reflected that often our prisoners come from the poorest parts of society, and our lawyers come from backgrounds of privilege. St. Oscar Romero said that certain things can only be seen through eyes that have cried. And I realized that experience of having your fingernails pulled out in the police station, or being there for years and years without trial, or getting the death penalty and never getting a copy of your judgment to know exactly why you were condemned, that can create a passion for justice that's not academic, it's not intellectual, but it's because your heart has been formed by your own experience of injustice. The former Pope Benedict said that if you want to serve others, if you want to engage in charity type work, of course you need to be competent, you need to have skills, but the first qualification should be formation of your heart, so you can give the look of love that the person you're serving craves. I think we all want to be looked on as beloved, a term that Bruce uses and I love. So we look on each other as brothers and sisters, and we look on those that we serve in that way, and that comes because we understand what it is to be them, because we've walked in their shoes, as Bruce has so beautifully put.
That's quite radical idea, and I love it, and that's at the heart of Justice Defenders. We talk about unlikely allies, people from all across the criminal justice spectrum wanting to make a difference in the criminal justice system that we recognize is broken in many ways. We're here in New York State, where most recently we had a number of strikes in the prisons, a number of deaths in custody. It seems like the system is coming to a breaking point. Could this be a solution?
This can very well be a solution. If Justice Defenders were to enter the New York State prison system and we found correction officers who were willing to learn side by side, who didn't see themselves as different from the person that they lock in a cell at night. Because the reality is we're all part of the human family. And if they didn't see themselves as being better or being, more than someone who is accused of committing a crime or convicted of committing a crime and willing to learn side by side, if they saw the humanity in the other person, in those that are incarcerated, this can be revolutionary inside New York State prisons. For the past 3 to 4 weeks, New York State has had the National Guards inside the prisons. There's been 7 deaths. 2 lives were taken. Robert Brooks, whose life was taken on camera. His life was taken by 14 correction officers while medical staff sat there and looked and watched. I'm sure you can Google any news media outlet and put in the name Robert Brooks and you'll see it pop up. Another young man was killed in mid-state, young Muhammad, Natwi Muhammad, I believe his name. I may be pronouncing it wrong. He was a very young guy whose life was taken inside of mid-state again. And 5 other deaths. 1 we believe was suicide, and 1 we have unknown causes of, and others that have died because the National Guards simply do not know how to run an institution because they're young. They're National Guards. They don't come from corrections. And New York State correction officers have decided to walk off the job and protest because the real reason is because they've been exposed. Because to be quite frank with you, the standard has always been to brutalize incarcerated people in New York State and sometimes to beat them to death. That's standard behavior. This is nothing new. This is now just being caught on film. You see, Robert Brooks was the George Floyd of formerly incarcerated people, right? So Robert Brooks was our George Floyd. To see that man brutalized and beaten on camera, knowing what my experiences was, knowing the experiences of countless men and women who were incarcerated with me, who can tell you stories of the exact identical beatings that they've received, the torture that they've received while inside these prisons. I commend the fact that 2,000 of the officers were fired, but something has to be done to change the hearts and minds of incarcerated people and those who look over them, particularly these correction guards, these prison guards, who for some reason believe that brutality is an answer. It's never the answer. Solitary confinement is never the answer because it's a form of torture. Right? If we provide incarcerated people with education, with the legal knowledge and the tools to be equipped to advocate for themselves and others, the same results that you've seen in Kenya and Uganda, I'm sure you will see that in New York State and in the United States prison system. But we have to have the willingness of the guards. We have to have the buy-in of the administration. And I'm sure that it can be done because I've met some of the most brilliant minds behind prison bars. You know, Derek Hamilton is one of them. He was known as what they call a jailhouse lawyer. Jabbar Collins is another one. Both of these men, while incarcerated, studied the law and now are educating countless others about the law in the community. So there are countless instances of men who were incarcerated. Jody Polk, who was doing extraordinary work with the jailhouse lawyers over at NYU. Darren Breeden, who was doing extraordinary work. Right? Someone who I was also incarcerated with that studied the law. So there are countless examples of people who have transformed their lives, transformed their minds. And there are countless examples of people who are willing to, come out and do the work. They have not forgotten what they've left behind. They've not forgotten the incarcerated men and women that they left behind prison bars.
Yes.
And they're here to serve.
Mm-hmm. It's incredibly powerful what you're saying, and we have so many examples. I hear in the U.S., in Kenya, in Uganda, all over the world. I'm sure there are people who are doing exceptional things with great love to serve their communities. And at Justice Defenders, we want to bring them together. We see ourselves as conveners, as catalyzers for this movement, for justice. So what does community building look like on the inside and the outside, bringing together all these different players?
I think Justice Defenders collaborating with an extraordinary organization that funded my education, Hudson Link, can be a beautiful collaboration, along with RTA, Rehabilitation Through the Arts, which is headed by a good friend of mine, Jermaine Archer now. I think when you bring these three organizations together and say, well, this is what we want to do in prisons across New York State, I think you can change the entire system as it is today. But again, we would want buy-in from the administration because we believe that our credibility speaks for itself. What we've done in the past, our record speaks for itself. The record in Uganda and Kenya, the impact that Justice Defenders has had in these two countries in 22 prisons speaks for itself. Just as the impact that Hudson Link has had in the countless prisons bringing higher education by way of Mercy College into several prisons. Sullivan Community College was a college that I graduated from while I was in Sullivan Prison. Bringing these institutions of higher education together with Hudson Link, Justice Defenders, and then the arts program. Because, as you know, everyone doesn't take to formal education, but some people use their creativity and the arts. So rehabilitation through the arts.
Yes.
I think that having these three groups together can create a pathway by which we have much more people who are willing to become more engaged and more involved. You'll see the entire culture of the prisons change. Right? You'll see less violence. And because the reality is people want to be treated like human beings. Because these are human beings we're dealing with. Right? People need to have their dignity intact. Right? People want to be seen as humans. And as you said, when each person lays down at night, they want to know that they went to bed, that they had a purpose.
That's right.
Right? And they want to wake up and say, I want to continue to fulfill that purpose. Whether it's going to RTA tonight, to rehabilitation through the arts, or going to Hudson Link College tonight, or going to study law with a couple of officers in the Justice Defenders night, right? These men want to go to bed at night knowing that they have purpose. Look at the movie Sing Sing. These are men that I was incarcerated with that have transformed their lives and were now in a movie that was actually nominated for an Oscar.
Amazing.
These were incarcerated men. That's a testament to the talent and the resilience and the intelligence that exists behind prison bars. So I think these three organizations coming together, we can transform New York State prisons.
What's your take, Alexander?
One of our values is solidarity, and I think that the vision that Bruce casts is one of solidarity between organizations, between prisoners and correction officers, between unlikely allies. We're in a world that's deeply divided. In our criminal justice systems, we operate in silos, often pointing fingers at each other from afar. We believe that we all need to be around the table together. Prisoners, prison officers, prosecutors, judges, defenders, because we all want to be part of just communities. I think fundamentally we all want to be part of a world where every accused person gets to tell their side of the story. So how do we celebrate our shared humanity? How do we celebrate our brotherhood? I think it's through sitting together, through being proximate, through listening to each other's stories, through eating together. So we realize how much we have in common, so we can reimagine who our people are, so we can build bridges across divides. We've seen that it's possible in Uganda and Kenya. I believe it's possible here too. We'd love to be part of that.
We need to reimagine what justice looks like. We need to reimagine what a criminal legal system looks like. Right? Because prison doesn't have to be punitive. Incarceration doesn't have to be punitive. If we reflect back on indigenous people and restorative practices, we can see they had a total different way of dealing with misconduct or behavior that was unacceptable in the community. Prisons are relatively new.
Yes.
Prisons are relatively new in the last couple of 100 years. Prior to that, what did we have? And I think we need to think about that as we begin to reimagine what these systems and policies look like, and how do we make them better, and we want people to come out better, not bitter, right? I mean, what type of person do you want moving next door to you? Because the reality is the vast majority of people incarcerated are coming home. And who do you want next to you? Someone who has been educated while they've been incarcerated, someone who has potentially has a law degree, someone who has practiced rehabilitation through the arts, and has found his ability to, in movement and the arts, to just revolutionize his whole mindset and his whole life, right? And develop a sense of compassion and love for human beings, because we all have it. You know, we're all created in the image and likeness of God. So that seed of good is within each and every one of us. How do we water and fertilize that seed? Through education, through empowerment, through humanity, and not dehumanizing those that don't look like us or don't have what we have. Whether it's racism or classism, right? We're all the same. And we need to do away with all of these isms and just see the human being that exists in front of us and understand, as Alexander said, that we need every voice at the table because every voice matters.
Mm-hmm.
Every voice matters. And that's how we make a difference.
How do you bring people to the table?
By inviting them. I think food is a good way. I think letting them know that we see them. I see you. Right? One of the things I remember doing is not long ago seeing a young person on the train who was unhoused. And I had brought something to them. After I brought what I brought to them, I didn't just give it to them. I asked them their name. And he said, who, me? I said, yeah, I want to know your name. And he told me his name. And then I said my name. And then I said to him, I see you. Because sometimes our people just want to be seen. They just want to be acknowledged. They just want to be known that they matter. Right? So we need to let our people know that they matter. Because my humanity is directly, inextricably intertwined to the homeless person that you see on the corner. He's no less human than I am. His conditions may be different, but his humanity matters just like yours and mine does. And when we understand that, and we create a situation where we can have people at the table who don't necessarily look like us or think like us, who don't really have, may has less or may have more, and we say, we want to find a common ground. Because I don't know one person that I was in prison with that didn't say that they want to go home to a safe community, that they want to go home to a place where they can rest their heads and be at some sense of peace. No one wants to come home to a community that is ravished by violence and crime. No one.
That's right.
We all want essentially the same things.
Alexander, when you started this work, who and what inspired you?
So I went out to Uganda inspired by hospice, inspired by Dame Cicely Saunders. She founded the modern hospice movement in the 1960s. She believed that each of us could live well until the last weeks, the last days, the last hours of our lives, and that all of our life is precious. And she wanted to come alongside those who were close to death that others had abandoned. She said at one point, all we have to offer is our minds and our hearts. And I think with us in this work, that's what we can offer too, and I think that it can transform things. So seeing Cicely Saunders and how she built hospice and this space that says every life matters fundamentally, every life is fundamentally precious, that shaped me. And I had her voice and ethos in my ears as I went and I met these dying prisoners. I thought fundamentally these are my brothers. Jesus said we should love our neighbours as ourselves. And I saw these guys in hospital, sometimes with maggots coming out of them, all their skin peeling off, or decomposing while they were still alive. And I thought, well, isn't this my neighbour? And so I tried to wash them and feed them. And then others came by my side, medical students and student nurses and security guards and gardeners. We had no money, we had no organisation, had almost no education between us, but we had that desire to serve, and that desire to serve in love. And I saw that we were a force to be reckoned with. And ultimately, it's looking at Jesus as an example, his subversive example of saying that every life matters, and those that others have cast out, those on the margins of society, those who look to be weak or poor, they're blessed, that there's strength there, that they're loved, that there's power in those places. And it's what we see. It's what we see with our work. Because in places where we expect to find death, there's life. You've been to death row to condemn section with me many times. We see life in abundance there. In places where we're looking for hopelessness and where we think, well, it's understandable to be hopeless, there's abundant hope. In places where we expect to find despair, there's resilience and compassion and kindness. I'm inspired by the people that I share life with. I'm inspired by you two, by their commitment, the determination, the compassion I see. I'm inspired by our people in prison and how they can keep on keeping on, how they can endure. There's a rabbinical saying that says we mustn't get tired of doing work that has no end. This work has no end, but they keep going. And finally, I'm inspired by those who can keep their hearts soft. Oscar Wilde, the novelist who was imprisoned in Victorian Britain, said the problem with prison isn't that it breaks our hearts. Our hearts are made to be broken, but rather it turns our hearts to stone. And that can be for people who live or work in prisons and in justice systems. And it's easy to become hard-hearted. Sometimes I feel, maybe it's happening to me. What do I do to keep my heart soft? So those who still have compassion, those who have mercy, those who are willing to get proximate, and those who cry freely. Albert Camus said, I want to live to the point of tears. Those who feel deeply and have that desire for change, they inspire me.
Incredible.
It's amazing that he said that, because I remember in 1996, when I first got to Greenhaven Maximum Security Prison, I was going to the law library, and a gentleman was coming from the law library. And he told me he would put me on the call-out, meaning that he would put me in to come to a particular class. He wanted me to come to a class called the Resurrection Study Group, which was founded by Eddie Ellis, who has been an inspiration to me, and the men of the Resurrection Study Group. But he said this guy's name was Infinite Essence, and he looked at me and he said, protect your soul. And I went back that day to the cell and I pondered on that statement. And what I understood was that he didn't want me to become hardened by the harsh realities of prison bars and concrete walls. He wanted me to maintain who I am, because where I am didn't have to define who I was or what I can become. And from that moment, I made a conscious decision to stay connected to my humanity, to see the good in people who we thought were just the worst, right? Whether they were incarcerated, whether they were officer. But also to protect my soul, because I don't want to walk around with a hardened heart. And I would always tell myself, you don't want to become that. You never want to become the very thing that you despise. So at that point, I began drawing affirmations and putting them on my wall. I began looking in the mirror that I would put behind a locker, and I would talk in the mirror and tell myself that I love myself. And I would literally say, you're beautiful, and I love you, Bruce, and you're going to make it through this. That self-talk was so important to me, protecting my soul, right? And it's why I believe wholeheartedly that along with my powerful relationship with God, which is the most meaningful relationship that I have, and the inspiration of my mother and father, who have been the greatest inspiration of my life, because she has loved me deeply in a way that I can't even, I can't even describe, as well as my father, who has loved me deeply, and on purpose, and loved me on purpose. They've always wanted me to be an example of love and not be hardened by those circumstances, by my conditions. So it's why I was able to come home better and not bitter. It's a conscious decision that I made, that I wasn't going to be bitter, that I was going to be better. Despite being wrongfully convicted, I knew that there was room for me to become a better person and continue to love myself as well as others around me.
Mm-hmm. That's amazing and incredibly powerful and incredibly difficult to sustain, especially for people like myself who've never spent one night in prison. I have no idea what it means even spending 29 years behind bars, wrongfully convicted. So how do you sustain that day in and day out?
I think continuing to love me, continuing to understand that people need people. People need people. We all need each other. Some days I may not be at my best, but like David encouraged himself in the Lord. And I believe that some days you have to encourage yourself. So if you wake up and you're on a 5, you got to encourage yourself to be on a 10. Because you can speak life. You can speak life into your own self, just as you can speak life into others. As Christ spoke life into us, into the valley of dry bones, they speak life into them. right? So there are so many gems that I internalize from constantly reading the Bible and the story of Christ Jesus and how he lived his life and the example that he set for humanity, right? There are so many examples, is why today I go to church every Sunday, oftentimes by myself, and then I go for walks in the park to reflect and to think about the decisions that I've made that week and how the next week I can do better and be better, right? Because self-development, personal growth has always been a journey, especially behind prison bars.
Yeah.
But I knew that if you wanted to be better, sometimes you had to take the road less traveled. And that was one of my favorite books by Dr. Scott Peck, The Road Less Traveled. And I understand that, you know, I may not be well today, I may not have what I need right now, but delayed gratification is so important because you have to fall in love with the journey.
Yes.
Falling in love with the journey is essential to my personal growth, my personal happiness, right? See, this is a journey. And unless you fall in love with the journey, then I think that your life will not be necessarily as happy and as joyous as you can possibly make it. And I've been in love with the journey ever since.
That's so countercultural, you know, society and culture that rewards instant gratification, quick result, quick bucks. It's really inspirational. What does it look like at Just Defender to sustain the heart and the mind through work that has no end, through work that is hard, through work that demands a lot of you and the people around you?
So I started this work when I was 18, naive, inexperienced. I think like many teenagers, I saw things in black and white. I had a sense of right and wrong, and I saw things in my late teens and my early 20s in different prisons around Africa, which I couldn't unsee and which shaped me deeply. In many ways, I didn't know how to respond to them, but it created a fire in me and a sense of urgency. I see a lot of it in Bruce. And it moved me to the point of tears again and again. I thought, well, I've got to do something. I never had an intention of starting an organization, becoming a CEO, anything like that, but I thought I've got to do something. And I think many of us will see things which challenge us deeply. We think, well, what do I do? And what Martin Luther King advised us is to take a first step in faith and then trust that the following steps will become clear. What happened for me with time, a decade in when I was 28, and I started building this organization, I realized that my heart was getting hard. For most of my 20s, I didn't cry. My wife and I had miscarriages. We went through great difficulties. We experienced pain, but I didn't cry because I'd learned to live kind of on autopilot or in black and white because I'd seen these things. I'd seen suffering, pain, death. I didn't know how to cope with it. So I'd kind of switched off my emotions. I got to 28, I realized I don't have peace. And so I went and I spent time at a monastery, some days in silence and reflected with the monks. I remember leaving and going to the train station afterwards and being on the platform, and everything within me was quiet and everything around me was quiet. I thought, this is what peace feels like. That was 10 years ago. So since then we've been asking, how do we balance action with contemplation? I've seen things which have formed me and given me a passion for justice. You guys have too. But I'm mindful that before I was born, countless others were passionate about justice. Now, countless others are. And once I'm dead and Justice Defenders is gone, countless more will be. I think that each of us has a little piece of the puzzle to play, or a little God-given role or calling. And I don't want to shy away from it. I want to be brave to do it, even if it's hard. But recognizing it's not all on me, not all on us. There's so much injustice. We can play our little part, and I want us to do that bravely and with humility, with solidarity, and then trust that others can see and learn. And in that spirit of solidarity, we welcome them. So we've been understanding, how do we pace ourselves? How do we come together as a community of black and white, rich and poor, imprisoned and free, torturer and one who's been tortured? Say that each of us is beloved. How do we share life from different cultures, with different personalities, with different experiences. How do we grow in understanding for each other? How do we grow in understanding for each other? I think it's about eating together. I think it's about praying together. I think it's about listening to each other. I think it's about grieving together and celebrating together. I think it's celebrating the big wins and the really small wins. I think it's about staying really close, leaning in to each other, because we can't do this work alone. Us three.
Community.
Yeah.
Community is so important.
Yeah.
It's so important. And as you said, we can't do this work alone. And I pray that there will come a time in my lifetime that there will be no need for a justice defenders. But if in fact there is, and our time to transition has come, my prayer is that justice defenders will continue. Because justice defenders is bigger than you or I.
For sure.
It's bigger than any one of us. And I implore our communities, those that are in power, that are able to do so, that to get involved. Look at justicedefenders.org. Look at what we do. Look at what our mission is. And if you find it in your heart to be a part of it, whether it's through donations, whether it's through volunteering, whether it's through just saying, well, what can I do? We welcome that. We welcome your hand in this struggle, in this journey. I won't say fight, but in this journey to liberation, in this journey to equality, in this journey towards universal love and to a better world. We invite you to get involved. We invite you to get involved, and there is no donation that doesn't count. There's no person whose hand doesn't matter. Your involvement matters. We will find something for you to do. We each have a skill and a talent that can contribute to what we're doing to change the criminal legal system universally across the globe, not just in the United States, but on the continent, where mass incarceration is ravishing lives on a much deeper level than it's ravishing lives here in America, to be quite frank with you. And just as it's ravishing lives in Europe, right? We need to create and develop a system where we don't need prisons anymore. But if in fact that we do have them, let's look to Sweden, to the example that they have. Let's look to the humane conditions by which we treat other people. And we implore everyone within the sound of my voice to get involved. We welcome you. We invite you. See what we're doing. See what Justice Defenders is all about. Come with us. Come, walk inside of a prison, because proximity is everything. Proximity changes lives. It makes the difference. Those closest to the problem usually have the answers and the solutions to them. Those that are directly impacted. And I want people to understand, whether you're rich or poor, if you never had a person in prison, you're still impacted by a criminal legal system that has a huge amount of talent languishing behind prison bars. And that talent could have an impact on your life. That talent can have an impact on your business. That talent can have an impact on your child's life. There are so many people behind bars who are impacting young lives, like my friend Keith Lamar, who is languishing on death row in Ohio, wrongfully convicted, who has a book club in a school right here in Manhattan, in New York City, changing lives, who does poetry, jazz, who does artwork from death row. And he's having an impact on lives all over, young lives from death row. So if he can do it, imagine what you can do. And if you don't have time, then, send someone, tell a friend about Justice Defenders and what we're doing. Right? But we all can be instrumental in changing the criminal legal system as we know it globally, and impacting the lives of those that are marginalized and are systemically oppressed, and just creating a better society, a better family, and a better world.
Amen to that, Bruce. Alexander, bring it home for us.
I'm not sure what more there is to say. I think this has been a glimpse of how it is when we get together as justice defenders in prisons. We sit together to listen deeply to each other. I think there's opportunities to do it in every community, regardless of how far apart we feel that we are, how deep the divisions are. Sitting patiently, listening to each other, we realize how much we have in common. Bruce has already given an invitation to join with us as this unlikely band of people walking with a limp. Some poor in spirit and some just poor. Inside and outside of prison, black and white. Trying to figure out, how do we love each other? How do we love and serve those who have no one else to tell their side of the story? Making mistakes as we go, but ultimately seeing lives transformed, seeing stories heard, and believing that transformation is possible for each of us and for our communities.
Thank you for this conversation today. It was incredibly inspiring. Thank you, Alexander.
Thanks for having me, and thanks to the studio. It's been really special spending this time together. And dear viewer, please feel welcome to come and join us on this journey. We'd love to have you with us.
And thank you, Bruce.
Thank you so much for having me, Justice Defenders. Thank you, IMI NYC, for this extraordinary experience in your studio and in your podcast studio, NYC. This is just amazing. For our viewers and our listeners, we just thank you for your support. You know, we invite you to go to justicedefenders.org to learn more about what we do. We invite you to get involved and be a part of what we do. We invite you to donate. We invite your support in every meaningful way that you can think of, because collectively we can change the world. We thank you so much. Thank you all for having me. I appreciate you. Oceans of gratitude. Thank you.
Thank you for listening. Thank you for viewing. Thank you for defending justice with us.